The Manson murders stand out as one of the most infamous crimes in American history. These killings, orchestrated by Charles Manson and carried out by members of his so-called family, shocked the world with their brutality and senselessness. The events, which took place over 2 days in August 1969, marked the end of the 1960s countercultural dream and brought to light the dangers of cult-like devotion and manipulation. The influence and control Manson held over his followers have made these murders a haunting example of how far blind loyalty can go. Charles Manson, a failed musician and career criminal, cultivated a devoted following in the late 1960s in California. His family, a group of mostly young women and a few men, was drawn to his magnetic personality and radical ideas. Manson preached a distorted philosophy that combined elements of the Bible, Scientology, and his own twisted interpretations of racial tensions and societal breakdown. He convinced his followers that an apocalyptic race war, which he called Helter Skelter, was imminent. Manson claimed that the war would end with African Americans overthrowing white society, but they would ultimately be unable to govern themselves. According to Manson's vision, his family would survive this chaos by hiding in the California desert and would then emerge as the natural leaders of the post-apocalyptic world. The Manson family's path to infamy began with a horrific act of violence on the night of August 8, 1969. The group, under Manson's command, targeted the home of actress Sharon Tate in Los Angeles. Tate, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, was married to film director Roman Polanski. Manson had ordered his followers, Susan Atkins, Charles Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, to enter the house and totally destroy everyone in it, as gruesome as you can. Manson did not participate directly in the killings but sent his disciples to carry out his orders. Inside the Tate residence that night were Sharon Tate, her friends Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, and Wojciech Frykowski, along with Stephen Parent, a young man visiting the caretaker of the property. In a horrifying spree of violence, the Manson family members brutally murdered all 5 victims. Tate, despite her pleas for the life of her unborn child, was stabbed repeatedly. The word pig was written in Tate's blood on the front door, a chilling mark left by Atkins as a sign of the killer's presence. The next night, Manson himself led the family to the home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, a wealthy couple living in Los Feliz, Los Angeles. Manson entered the house, tied up the couple, and then left, ordering his followers to finish the job. Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten carried out Manson's orders with brutal efficiency. The murders were vicious. Leno LaBianca was stabbed multiple times, and a carving fork was left protruding from his stomach. The word war was carved into his flesh, and death to pigs and Helter Skelter were scrawled in blood on the walls. These messages were meant to incite fear and confusion, hinting at Manson's twisted ideology and his desire to trigger the race war he had prophesied. The connection between the 2 nights of terror was not immediately clear to investigators, but the similarities in the brutality and the cryptic messages suggested a link. The police were initially baffled, with no apparent motive and no immediate suspects. It wasn't until Susan Atkins, who had been arrested on unrelated charges, began to talk about the murders to her cellmates that the pieces started to come together. Atkins boasted about the Tate killings and implicated other family members, revealing the full extent of their involvement in the murders. This information led to the arrest of Manson and several of his followers. During the trial, which began in 1970, the Manson family became a media sensation. Charles Manson's bizarre behavior in court, including his wild outbursts, carving an X into his forehead later altered to a swastika, and the chilling loyalty of his followers, kept the world riveted. His followers, including Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten, showed a disturbing lack of remorse, often smiling or laughing during testimonies about the brutal killings. Manson himself claimed he was innocent, asserting that he had no direct involvement in the murders and that his followers acted on their own volition. Manson believed that the Beatles' song Helter Skelter, from their 1968 White Album, was a coded message predicting the imminent race war. He saw himself as a messianic figure who would guide his followers through the chaos. Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi argued that Manson ordered the murders to incite fear and confusion, hoping to spark the racial conflict he had been predicting. This bizarre and twisted motivation was enough to secure convictions for Manson and several of his followers. Charles Manson and his co-defendants were convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. They were initially sentenced to death, but these sentences were commuted to life in prison in 1972, when the California Supreme Court temporarily abolished the death penalty. He continued to draw followers and inspire a dark fascination from behind bars, becoming a symbol of evil and manipulation. The Manson murders symbolized the violent end of the 1960s, a decade that had been marked by hope, peace, and the counterculture movement. The gruesome nature of the crimes shattered the idealism of the time, revealing a dark undercurrent of violence and disillusionment. The media coverage was intense, and the trials became a spectacle that highlighted not only Manson's control over his followers, but also the deep societal divisions of the era. These murders have since become a cultural touchstone, referenced in books, films, and documentaries. They serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of cult mentality, charismatic manipulation, and the susceptibility of individuals seeking meaning in uncertain times. Manson's twisted vision of Helter Skelter never came to pass, but the fear and horror he instilled in the American public endured for decades. Manson's ability to control and direct his followers to commit such heinous acts of violence against innocent people demonstrated the power of brainwashing and indoctrination. He preyed on the vulnerabilities of his followers, many of whom were searching for purpose and a sense of belonging. Under Manson's influence, they were willing to carry out acts that they might never have considered on their own. Charles Manson died in 2017 while serving his life sentence. The Manson murders continue to fascinate and horrify, serving as a stark reminder of the capacity for evil that lies within certain individuals and the devastating impact that a charismatic, manipulative leader can have on the lives of others. The events of those two nights in August 1969 forever altered the landscape of American crime and culture, leaving behind a legacy that still resonates in discussions about cults, manipulation, and the darker side of human nature. Thank you for listening to another episode of Loopholery, your go-to podcast channel for quick, witty, and insightful takes on random topics, all in 8 minutes or less. Whether we're diving into quirky facts, exploring weird loopholes, or just pondering life's strange questions, we keep it short, fun, and engaging. Perfect for curious minds on the go. Like or subscribe, and get your fix of unpredictable knowledge bites.